What's up, everybody? So today I want to review Captain America: The Winter Soldier in the Marvel Premiere Collection format. Um, and the story is by Ed Brubaker with art by Steve Epting. And there was a couple artists who also worked on this, but the main majority of the run came from Steve Epting. And I will be totally honest with you. I was not a big fan of this story. I know, hear me out. I know this is one of the highly acclaimed runs of Captain America, and a lot of people reference this as one of the top tier stories for Captain America. Even saying that the Ed Brubaker runs are some of the best runs of Captain America. I totally get it. I can understand why. That's not up for debate. I believe that this is one of the top tier runs for Captain America. Unfortunately, though, I just don't think it was something that I was personally looking for in a Captain America story. And that's where I think where my own expectations may have ruined what this book truly was instead of, what I wanted it to be. So I'm just going off the cover here. I'm thinking you're going to get a lot of action between Cap and Bucky, and that is not really the case. I'm thinking there's going to be tons of high octane moments and adrenaline pumping action, and that's not really what you get. You do get some action in this book. That's, you can't deny that, and there's some really, really cool parts, and really insane stuff does happen. But these two never really confront each other until very late in the book, at least in present day. And I guess that's what I was kind of bummed about, was the pacing of this book. And the pacing of this story. Overall, I felt like it was a lot of build-up, a small amount of climax at the end, and then an immediate ending that felt kind of abrupt to me. And I mean, let's face it, I read the entire book and I thought I was going to get a complete story, and I'm sure this is a complete story, but it just didn't feel that way to me. I don't want this to come off the wrong way. This is by no means a bad story, or a story arc, or run, or anything like that. I can see why people liked this run. It's not beyond me. It's just something that I personally wasn't very satisfied with when reading it. Again, it's just personal taste. It's not a knock on the book or the author or the artist or anything like that. I just wasn't a fan of this. I felt like for all of the build-up, there wasn't much payoff in the end. Or at least the payoff was so quick you didn't really get to enjoy it and really sit in it for a little bit and really have time for it to sink in and have fun with it. So, yeah, I mean, look, the characters are very well written, they're well developed, and there's a lot of detail in each of them that goes into their backstory and, who they are and why they are the way they are. And I can appreciate that. They're very well written when it comes to that, and they're very fleshed out. They feel real, and that's great. And, kudos to Ed Brubaker for being able to do something like that. I would imagine that is no small feat. So I can see why people like this. I would say this is something like a crime drama, or a suspense maybe. But if you're looking for some sort of action-packed thriller, nail-biter, edge of your seat, fight scenes and stuff like that, this may not be the Captain America story for you either. I'll tell you what. I'll go ahead and give it my personal score, and then I will explain more later with spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled by this, the rest of this review, I'll tell you this now. I thought that the build-up was about 90% of the book for what turned out to be a very small payoff at the end, and then an abrupt, or what I thought was an abrupt ending. I would give this book, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, either a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. And I know, for fans of the comic, For fans of Captain America, you probably think that's blasphemy. I totally get it. But go ahead and turn off right now if you don't want spoilers, because we are going to jump into heavy, heavy spoilers for the rest of this review. Hey, Phoenix. Even Phoenix is like, no, don't spoil it. It's about to get spoiled. So, Cap in this book he's almost like a downtrodden, broken Captain America. Or maybe not completely broken, but he's on that verge of breaking. Because in the very beginning, the first issue lets you know that in a previous run or series before this, Captain America had to deal with the loss of Hawkeye. He apparently got killed. And also, the Avengers got dismantled. So he's dealing with that. So he's already coming to this, and he feels burdened. He's stressed. A lot's weighing on Captain America right away when you start reading this, and you're like, oh man, this is pretty heavy. This is not kind of the Captain America vibe that you would anticipate or think you'd have him feel. So, you see the Red Skull kind of setting things in motion to kind of torture and torment Cap with all this mental stress and this anguish and agony. But then, boom, Red Skull dies. So he's not going to play a big part in this, which, just judging off the cover, I didn't think he'd play a part in it at all. But anyway, he's off of the table. He's out of this game. You're not going to see a lot of him. Then you get to this guy named Alexander Lukin, or Alec Lukin. He is one of the people from the Russian Cold War, I believe, and his mentor was Karapov. He was the one. His mentor was the one that was with Captain America and Bucky back in World War II when they were running that op against Master Man or something that the Russians or that the Germans and Hitler and all that stuff had. So they went to this small village. I think it was Kronos or Kranos. It was the name of the corporation. It was actually a village at one point, and it got destroyed in the fight with Captain America and Mastermind and all these super-powered people. And Captain America even said he knew that these people would hold him responsible for what had happened there, even though they were trying to save them and protect them. So that went south. So Karapov, that's just what I'm going to call him because I don't remember his exact name. I could probably thumb through it, but I don't want to take too much time and try to do that. He wound up taking on a young kid who you see in the aftermath of this war had lost his mom, and that was the Alexander Lukin guy. So there's this long-standing grudge, basically, against Captain America for all this, and they're wanting him to suffer. Lukin is now unleashing this plan to really break down and bring down Captain America, and he's using every means possible. And they have the Cosmic Cube, and the Cosmic Cube needs to apparently be fueled by death and destruction. And so they go about doing this by setting up certain events that cause death and pain. So the Red Skull, I believe his death contributed to some of the energy that was sent to the Cosmic Cube in the beginning. Then there was a bomb that got set off which eventually led to more energy going into the Cosmic Cube. And all the while that this is going on, Cap is having hallucinations along with flashbacks of his time with Bucky and his time in the war and the people that he could have saved and all this stuff. So you see more and more mental anguish going on inside Cap's head and all of this stuff playing out, and you start to see these string of events of they're starting to say that Bucky's alive, and he's like, no, that can't be the case. I watched Bucky die. He stopped a drone from destroying a place and all this good shit. And then it turns out that Bucky actually did break free from the explosion. He was found in the waters by the Russians, by Karapov. Karapov took him. They thought that he was so incredible on the battlefield that he also had to have some sort of super soldier serum in him like Captain America did. But it turns out Bucky was just a straight up certified badass. No serum. He was just trained to be fucking awesome like that. But yeah, you're getting these all in flashbacks. And this is a buildup that you would think halfway through the book would be more than enough to set you up for these two to finally meet. But they do not meet until the last issue. Officially meet until the last issue of this book. Cap thinks he sees Bucky, which he does, in a couple issues before the end of the book, where Cap is, helping clear out, survivors of that bomb explosion, and the aftermath of that, and then he's fighting these MODOK soldiers, and Bucky steps in and shoots one of the soldiers that's gonna attack Captain America from behind, because he was told or ordered not to kill Captain America right away. And so this is all just furthering this anguish for Captain America, and I guess it's also feeding the Cosmic Cube somehow. I believe that was the link between the two of them. Correct me if I'm wrong. I could be totally way off base with this, but it felt like that was part of the things that was fueling the cube. And it was just tons of this, like flashback after build up after build up, and all this stuff was happening without any real payoff until the very end. And honestly, in a book like this, you're trying to attract new readers, people who aren't already avid comic book readers of Marvel, of Captain America, and you're trying to give them a story that will hook them onto this character, that'll make them be like, oh, yo, dude, this character's awesome. I want to keep reading runs that he's in because this is a fantastic character and I'm excited for it. This one didn't feel like that. A lot of the notable action that Captain America was in the present time was him fighting henchmen. Like nobodies. They're no-names. They're lackeys. And he's fucking them up. And don't get me wrong, there are some cool panels in this. Lots of great action panels where he's doing some, crazy cool Captain America shit. But when it comes to him fighting a formidable foe or a villain that's, even got a perfect example. He comes into contact with Crossbones. Crossbones wipes the floor with him. And why? Is it because Crossbones has the upper hand, the advantage, some sort of secret weapon or special tactics? No. It's because Cap's got a lot on his mind. You kidding me? What the fuck? What is that? That's not something I think of when I think of Captain America. You caught him slipping? You caught him lacking? That doesn't sound like Captain America to me. So that was a part of this one issue, and I thought to myself, this is what you decided to launch with for a Marvel Premiere Collection? Don't even get me started on that. I think the launch lineup of the Marvel Premiere Collection was kind of fumbled, to be totally honest. Not saying that the stories they released aren't great, but you either should have doubled the amount that you have out by now, or released much stronger versions of the comics that you have now. For example, you mean to tell me you couldn't have launched a Thor comic? The obvious one that stands out is Jason Aaron's run with the Saga of Gore the God Butcher. You mean to tell me that couldn't have been adapted into a Marvel Premiere Collection format? That would have been perfect. That would have been a prime example of hooking people with a character and getting them so interested in the character that they want to keep reading other story arcs about them. I would not have minded so much reading this if this was my third or fourth Captain America comic, but this was my true introduction to Cap with his own comic. Not seeing him in someone else's comic or seeing him in a video game or a movie or an animation. This is the Captain America comic that I read first, and I gotta say, being brutally honest, I'm a little underwhelmed. And I know people are going to lose their minds over that, but just for my personal taste, just for my own expectation of what I thought this was going to be, I thought this was going to be action-packed. I thought it was going to be, these two going at it, at least for a few issues. 3 or 4 issues in this run, and then having, a satisfying conclusion. But these two finally meet at the last issue with, full-on action between them, and then it just ends. You see Cap grab the cube, the cosmic cube that, Lucan wanted Bucky to protect or to hide. And then, Winter Soldier's still sort of obeying orders at this point, enough to at least follow Lucan's orders. And then Cap grabs the cube and he's like, remember who you are. It's literally right here. I just by happenstance happened to turn to the fucking page. Remember who you are. And then all of a sudden, Bucky starts having this big wave of emotion hit him, and these big flashes of who he really was and who he used to be, and his time with Cap in the war and all this stuff. And then finally being, recovered by the Russians and them experimenting on him and turning him into their, private assassin. That part was great. But you mean to tell me that 90% of the book was a build-up to that, just for it to abruptly end with Bucky grabbing the cube, crushing it? Pretty much, I would assume it literally destroyed it, unless it comes back somehow. I don't know. But crushes it and vanishes. He vanishes to the airport, or the Air Force, not Air Force, the military base where him and Cap first met. That was a poetic ending. That was kind of nice. But then he's like, he's lost. He doesn't know who he is. But Cap's like, I know he's out there. Cap never gave up on him in the whole book. And there's something commendable to be said about that. But that doesn't carry the entire story of the book. I feel like, man, there were plenty of chances in here for there to be tons of action. Can I tell you what I like the most about this book? My favorite part, it didn't even deal directly with Captain America or with Bucky. It was literally the death of Jack Monroe. This run right here. The death of Jack Monroe. Dude, are you kidding me? This was like what I'm assuming they thought would have been their one-shot throwaway kind of thing. This was the coolest part of the fucking book, man. If not the coolest part, it was definitely one of the better parts. The ending was good, but it was just like all the build-up that led up to the ending made me not enjoy the ending as much, because it was like so abrupt. And after all that, Cap still didn't get to reunite with Bucky. There was still no like, oh hey, him and the Winter Soldier got to like talk about some things and settle down, and maybe they could try to bring him into the ranks and train together and all that. Look, I get it. Again, it was expectation, my own expectations being projected onto this book and making it something that it wasn't, or it wasn't supposed to be. So that is why I think I didn't like it as much as a lot of other people, because I was putting something on this book that it's not what this book is. And again, it's not a bad book. It's not a bad book by any stretch, and I can see clearly why people like it and say it's one of the best Captain America runs. For sure, no doubt. But for me, for my own personal taste, this was not a favorite of mine. And if you were to hand this to me, and I knew nothing about Captain America, like no movies, no games, no animation, nothing. This was my very first introduction to the character, I would think, dude, Captain America, not that cool of a character. In fact, I would think Winter Soldier, cooler, and then the Jack Monroe guy was cooler than both. And it's just not a good first impression of a character. This is not the book that I would have put out for someone to get hooked on reading, not just Marvel Comics, but Captain America. However, if you go online and if you look at like the popular consensus, people love this. They love it. They say it's fantastic. It's a phenomenal run, and would highly recommend it to anybody who wants to read a good Captain America story. It's just, for me, man, I know I keep going in circles and saying it over and over again, but it just seemed like so much build-up for so little payoff, and it didn't make Captain America feel like the Captain America that I envision when I think about that. I think about him being like a tough, badass, hardcore leader who's, down for, putting his life on the line, saving people, and you got that. You got some of that with this character, but he was fighting a lot of henchmen and beating them, but he got his clock cleaned by fucking Crossbones, and it wasn't even a match. It was he's got a lot on his mind. He can't fight in this condition. He's got to get away. He's got to escape. Look, tactical retreat. I get it. But it just feels like this wasn't the best foot forward that you could have done, the best portrayal of Captain America that you could have done, and I'm a little bummed with it. And honestly, this was my first Marvel Premiere Collection comic that I read. I'm gonna run through all of them because I wound up picking up all of them, even the ones I didn't think I would like. I picked them up anyway because there's only 8 of them out, so I was like, you know what? Run through them, check them out, see what I think. For the first one, I gotta say, I'm kind of unimpressed. And with the launch lineup of the Marvel Premiere Collection, I'm bummed. I wouldn't hate it so much if there were, like I said, double the amount of comics that were out now, and I think that would be better. And just stronger comics, like stronger titles, stronger like introductions to characters that would really get people hooked. Again, the Gore the God Butcher saga for Thor, why is that not in your initial run? Why was that not dropped like immediately? You don't have a single Spider-Man comic? He's your highest selling superhero for Marvel. That's crazy. The Wolverine comic that you put out was Old Man Logan. That's your introduction to not only Wolverine, but to like the X-Men, really? That's the introduction that you go with to hook people? Bro, you gotta have already a little bit of knowledge of Wolverine and the X-Men to really vibe with that. I mean, you don't really have to, but it helps. It helps. You couldn't have set that up with a different X-Men and drop the Old Man Logan maybe a little ways down the line. They're coming out with Planet Hulk, which I think will be good, but they're also coming out with The Visions. A Vision book, a Vision comic book, before you get a Spider-Man comic. Before you get an X-Men comic, like a true X-Men comic, not like a Logan or a Wolverine comic. That's crazy to me. That I don't understand it. That blows my mind. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in how the Marvel Premiere Collection is being handled, and that could just be my initial knee-jerk reaction. It could totally be just my frustration after reading this book. I could run through Daredevil, Punisher, Hawkeye. I know I'll like Hawkeye because I started reading it on the Marvel Unlimited app a while back, and then I never went back to it, and that was a fantastic book. I know that, and I know that once I complete the run in the Marvel Premiere Collection, it'll be phenomenal. But not taking anything away from Hawkeye, is there really no other titles that you could have thought to have released first? Like, really? And then on top of that, this is the perfect format to not only send out some of your biggest hitters, but to also hook people on characters that don't get a lot of popularity and love from casual readers. Like, I would love to read a good run of Ghost Rider, or Moon Knight, or Nova, or the Eternals. My only impression of the Eternals is what I saw from the MCU. And I hear that's not a good indication of what the Eternals were like to read. So, I mean, stuff like that. This is like your perfect chance to like give these people a good set of stories that they could, really sink their teeth into and become loyal, Marvel comic fans, want to give you their time, want to give you their money, want to, pursue all the stories that you have out for these characters. But man, this turned into almost a little bit of a rant, and I'm sorry. I'm really, truthfully, I didn't have any intention of making it me ranting and complaining about it, but this was definitely not what I expected when I was picking this up. I thought I was going to get, again, a little bit more action, a little bit more time for this to breathe with these two fighting each other, a little bit more time like at the peak of this, but really the buildup was there for probably a little bit too long in this book. And then, there was what seemed like a very, very abrupt ending where the climax it happened literally in the last issue instead of somewhere in the middle of the book where you would think it would happen, or early middle, but none of it. No. And I mean, like I said, you get cool spots in the book, cool action-packed things, but as far as someone who's a casual reader of the comics and, wanting to get into this, I would say that hopefully someone can maybe direct me to a better Captain America run, because like I said, nothing against this book. Nothing against this book or Ed Brubaker. It just was not what I was expecting. That is it. That is why I gave it a 7 out of 10. Not because it is a bad book, not because it's like trash and no one should read it. I can clearly see why someone would fucking love this story. It's just, I wanted something that I thought would be like quintessential Captain America, where he's like going in, fighting big name villains, saving the day, doing awesome, crazy shit where he's just like beating all the odds. He's the underdog in a lot of these things, or he won't give up. He's willing to lay it all on the line and sacrifice himself and all this stuff. In the fucking middle of this book, or in the early part of this book, you see him run away from Crossbones because he can't think straight. He can't clear his head. He can't, stand and fight. And that just, man, that was one of the things that blew my fucking mind. Truthfully, I was like, wow, that's a bummer. It's a bummer. And, yeah. So, 7 out of 10. Oddly enough, I enjoyed reading a good chunk of this. It's just over time, the longer it went on, the less satisfying it became. And I know that sounds crazy, and I know I sound dumb saying it. I know it. And I know somewhere deep down, I want to love this. I want to be as psyched about this as a lot of other people are. But man, it didn't click with me. It just didn't. It didn't. The art was great. Character development was great. It's just, man, that build up took forever. And that payoff seemed like I read all that for nothing. Yeah, I'm just being a sore sport at this point, a little sourpuss. But honestly, I'm excited to read more Captain America. I know that sounds dumb after what seems like me bitching about this for the last, 10, 15 minutes. I shouldn't have let it go on this long. Sorry for these long videos. I know I just get carried away. I love talking about geek stuff, comics, games, all geek things, and it's just I get carried away. I love it. Thanks for listening. If you stuck around this long, which, boy, I can't imagine you did. It's a 30-minute fucking video. But let me know. Let me know if you did. Like, comment, subscribe, all that regular YouTube stuff. Yeah, man. Let me know what you thought of Captain America and why you liked it or didn't like it, like I didn't like it. So yeah, I'll quit rambling. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.